Good afternoon, everybody. A really warm welcome to the Children's Scrutiny panel of Kirklees Council on the Tuesday, the 12th of July 2022, starting at 3 p.m. Welcome to those people who are in the council chamber, those people who join us on team, and anybody who's watching it live streamed or at a later date. Just a reminder that the meeting will be, the webcast will be recorded for archive purposes, to be aware of that this afternoon. Okay, so item number 1, membership of the committee. Just to formally note that Councillor Elizabeth Reynolds has replaced Councillor Joe Lawson on the panel, and we have received apologies this afternoon from Councillor Elizabeth Reynolds, who is recovering from, she has COVID and recovering from it, so our thoughts are with Elizabeth this afternoon. Apologies from Tony Bromley, and those are the apologies, and everybody else is here. So I'm going to ask panel members to introduce themselves this afternoon, and we'll do that, and then officers will introduce themselves when their items come forward. So I'm Andrew Marchington, Kirklees Councillor, Chair of the Children and Young People Scrutiny Panel. Paul
White, Kirklees Councillor and Panel Member.
Oliver Gibson, Co-op T and Panel Member.
I'm a Councillor Ahmad Anwar from Dewsbury West.
Graham Sunderland, Co-op T.
And James.
Yeah, hi there, my name's James Homewood. I'm a councillor in Ashbrown.
And Richard.
Good afternoon, Richard Smith, Kirkburn Ward Councillor, Panel Member.
Thank you for those introductions. Item 2 is the minutes of the previous meeting. Can we approve those as a correct? Those of us who were there, the meeting on the 30th of March 2022. Paul and I, that's his. Can we approve those as a correct record? Yep.
Yes, correct
Thank
record.
You. Lovely. Thank you. I think any matters arising will be come up on the other items on the agenda. Item 3, interests. Any members of the panel got an interest to declare? Graham?
I'm a trustee of Northope Hall, which is a children's charity which has some dealings with the council.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you. And I think we've discussed this so that you letting us know that so as a matter of transparency, if there's it's not likely to happen during this meeting, but there's anything that's sort of a discussion, any contractual relationships between the council and Northope Hall, then we'll declare a different interest, a pecuniary interest, and you might withdraw from those discussions. But in the meantime, we value any contributions you can make using your experience. That's valuable experience. Thank you.
Chairman, can I just ask, would you advise me to make that declaration at each meeting, or would this first meeting be sufficient?
I think that's sufficient doing it at this meeting. Yeah. And you might, if we're discussing children and young people's mental health and it strays into that area, you might just want to remind people at that meeting that that's the case. So you might be speaking from your experience. If you ever feel uncomfortable about what we're discussing, you can state that and withdraw at that stage, Graham. But I think we really value your experience that would bring. So thank you. Yeah. Right. Item 4, all of our meetings are held in public, unless there's a reason not to do so. And if there's any item that we discuss this afternoon where we wish to go into a private session, we will move the relevant resolutions, but I don't envisage that being done at the moment. Item 5, have we received any deputations or petitions? No. Item 6, have we received any requests from members of the public to ask a question? No, we've not. Okay. So we're going to go into item 7, which is a verbal update on the educational outcomes report and the next steps and priorities for children's services. So Chris Jessup, I think you're going to introduce that for us. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Chris Jessup. I'm Head of Educational Outcomes here at Kirklees Council. I'm going to provide a brief verbal update on the educational outcomes for 2021-2022, which is on a flight path to Cabinet on the 26th of July of this year. As the minutes mentioned previously, we presented the draft of version of the report previously for comments and feedback from Scrutiny panel members, and I wanted to thank you for helping to shape, tweak, and improve that report, as I say, which is now on that flight path. Just very briefly, the report, as mentioned previously, encapsulates the challenges and also any reportable outcomes that we had during 2021-2022 academic year. And although there is only limited information, the report does still show how resilient the system was in providing that continuity of education. And one of the things that I wanted to update Scrutiny on this afternoon is although that limited data was only available for that 21-22 period, the report for Cabinet will make reference to the ongoing work, the ongoing obsessions, and to the next steps that are in place already to further improve outcomes for learners across Kirklees. So I thought that will be the key issues that I'll be discussing in this verbal update today, Chair. And at the heart of improving educational outcomes sits our learning strategy, which is known as our Kirklees Futures. For colleagues who don't already know, there are three key obsessions that weave throughout our Kirklees Futures, and those obsessions are of inclusion, resilience, and equity, and they run through the ambitions and the visions, but also the subsequent implementation plan that I'll talk about briefly in a moment. We've continued to progress the aims and ambitions of the learning strategy, and a brief update, as I say, Chair, around some of the work that's been going on to amplify that out into the system. We held our inaugural Our Kirklees Futures Learning Summit on the 23rd of June 2022 this year at the University of Huddersfield. And this event brought together a really full and wide range of educational providers, wider partners from Kirklees and beyond, local experts, local services, and also expert speakers from the fields of health, education, and care. There were over 160 delegates registered for the day, and there were exhibitors and a range of speakers from within Kirklees, including, absolutely crucially, the voices of learners themselves, and who were bringing their stories and their lived experiences to the event. But as well as being an opportunity for networking, for collaboration, and for that professional dialogue, which is absolutely crucial, a key aim of the day was to begin to move the first steps of the strategy and take it from planning to implementation. The success of the strategy relies heavily on the engagement of everyone across the district, and so it was really heartening to see the event supported by colleagues from across not only the local education sector but also partners and guests from outside Kirklees as well. A tremendous success. The summit highlighted that we all share the same goal of ensuring that every learner in Kirklees, regardless of their age or their circumstances, is able to aspire, achieve, and enjoy the very, very best possible start in life. It was a powerful experience, but as with all of these things, it's about what we do next that really, really counts. We're aiming to build quickly, Chair, on that momentum, and the Education and Learning Partnership Board will be looking to approve and share our implementation plan as soon as possible, with costings and priorities accompanying that. This continued partnership approach is absolutely central to the vision and values of our Kirklees Futures. Some of the key themes that were part of that learning summit, and some of the key themes that run through the educational outcomes report, and also the work of the school improvement team in this academic year moving forward. We held initial planning meetings with contributors so that they understood the backgrounds and the aims of the learning strategy. And also we gave contributors the background and information around the high quality and best practice that already exists in Kirklees. And we wanted this to be promoted and celebrated and connected as a central theme throughout the summit. We wanted to ensure that there was a full breadth and relevance of content was included for all attendees, that it wasn't just a school concentrated just on school improvement. We're very aware that the educational outcomes journey begins well before school and also into post-16 and beyond. So it was really important that we had something for all attendees in relation to their different ages, phases, settings and sectors. And we ensured that there was a consistency of message from individual expertise and how this was connected to the current local and planned practice and delivery. We shared a plan on a page with all colleagues at the summit. We had similar vocabulary. And we also had meetings and briefings held with Cabinet members and the Director of Children's Services, the Head of Service for Early Learning and Early Support, to align strategic direction, gather inputs and views, and ensure that their key priorities and messages were triangulated with speaker content and the ambitions of the strategy. Chair, as I've mentioned earlier, the Education and Learning Partnership Boards have been given the opportunity to comment and feedback on the draft implementation plan. And for members' information, that took place last Friday. So hopefully you can see that the momentum continues behind our Kirklees Futures going into the summer break. The intention, as I've said, is to have a prioritised and costed implementation plan ready for circulation to the wider system at the start of the academic year. So the success of the Learning Summit has produced that momentum for the learning strategy throughout the district. The learning strategy is our key vehicle for improving educational outcomes within Kirklees. As I said, it's mentioned and referenced throughout the report that's on its way through to Cabinet, and it will be mentioned and referenced through in subsequent reports to this committee. There have been conversations with constituent groups such as secondary heads and special school heads groups and schools forum, and they've provided further opportunities to reflect and feedback to officers. So just as a summary for this verbal update, Chair, if I may, the report is on its flight path through Cabinet with help previously from members in its current iteration. And again, I thank colleagues and members for that. We're agreeing an implementation plan with Educational Learning and Partnership Board, which we will circulate in due course. We're creating a communication plan to ensure that all stakeholders are informed of current and next steps to keep the momentum going. We're reviewing Education, Learning and Partnership Board to ensure that it's able to hold the system to account for the actions of the strategy. And last but by no means least, we're beginning planning for next year's summit. So that's the verbal update, Chair. I'm more than happy to take queries, comments and feedback as a result.
Thank you, Chris, for that verbal update. Panel members, questions or comments on Chris's report? Fine. Okay. I think I'll just will reiterate the point. Yeah, thank you for that. I'm just interested again, the restructuring or reshaping of the Education and Learning Partnership Board. How are you going to do that? Would be really useful to think about. Obviously, partnership working is one of our key areas of focus for Scrutiny, and to think about in that reshaping how we might contribute to that, who's around, and also how that board scrutinises the outcomes, the work that you're doing. Again, it's interesting. Great to hear you're planning next year's summit and getting the annual report. That's thinking. I think things that we would like to look at over time is looking at longitudinal outcomes and how we can keep an eye on that. So how those of us that are around in 5 years' time, 10 years' time, if we've got children working, just entering the education system at the moment, the age of 3, 4, where they're going to be when they get 16 plus, when they finish at Greenhead or Kirklees College or one of the other sixth form institutions. What about university? If they go through to the University of Huddersfield, that's a long time. So there's long-term, what we're doing now is going to have a long-term impact on the educational outcomes. So those would be the two things I would want us to be looking at.
Thank you, Chair. Just very briefly to come back on that, if I may. Absolutely, this is a learning strategy that takes us through to 2030. It's designed to have deep-rooted system improvement And I say that longitudinal analysis can begin in earnest now that we're starting to go back to the data that's being produced now, and will be coming up for 22-23. And what I'd hope as well for scrutiny is that we would be able to bring forward the educational outcomes, indicative information for 22-23 much more speedily than we have for 21-22. And I hope that will be useful in informing members.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I think the other request was if we can have any reports that go into Cabinet or to other bodies circulated to scrutiny panel members through Helen as soon as possible. That would be appreciated.
With pleasure.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. That's great. Again, thank you to everybody, both council officers and partners who put in so much work in this area. Okay. Right, item 8 is to consider anything for pre-decision scrutiny, cabinet decisions on the horizon. I've got one item I want to bring up, but it's the opportunity for cabinet members or officers to let us know, give us a heads up about stuff that might be coming through cabinet that we might want to be involved with at this stage, so we can build scrutiny into it before the report sort of goes to cabinet and gets through. Love that word Chris was using, flight path. Can be involved in the early days of the flight path. So Carol, our cabinet member here, I think on our senior officers, anything that's on the horizon you want us to be looking at?
To be honest, thank you. I think you've actually picked up most of it. I mean, the most important thing from my part of the Children's Services portfolio, anyway, certainly is the Kirklees Futures, which you've just had a report on. That there isn't anything immediately, anyway, on its way through cabinet, unless Joanne, of course, will know, might know better than me, something she's not even raised with us as portfolio holders yet. So, Jo?
Good afternoon. I'm Joanne Sanders. I'm Service Director for Learning and Early Support. I think Councillor Patterson and scrutiny colleagues, you will be aware around our SEND transformation plans, which will involve some periodic cabinet reports. So we're just in the middle of having a consultation about creating some additional sufficiency around additionally resource provisions, working with our mainstream schools to develop places. And so coming forward in the autumn term, there will be some decision making that we'll be asking Cabinet to undertake where those schools are maintained, and we'll be working in partnership with the Department for Education where some of that provision is with our academy schools. So I do think there'll be things coming along the horizon in relation to the SEND part of the world through into the autumn term. And of course, we really want to be engaging with scrutiny along the way around all those proposals. Thanks.
Thanks, Joanne. That's really appreciated. I think just pick up on that around the sufficiency. I think there's that'd be really useful. The thing I've picked up, and I know Tom's emailed me today. We've got the outcome of the SEND inspection, which I think there's a request for that to come back to panel in September, which I'm happy with. But it's the development of the action plan. So I think there's a real opportunity for panel members, scrutiny panel members, to observe how that action plan is developed and gets into place, and actually to build into that action plan how we might scrutinise the outcomes of that, or witness how you are scrutinising the outcomes of that, so we can build that in at this stage. So when it gets to panel in September, a lot of that's already built in. And I think the phrase I heard you using, Joanne, was you told us we did. And I think it's really useful for us as scrutiny panel members to watch that, so where parents have been engaged with, that we can hear what parents have said and how that's been included in any action plans and outcomes. And that was a bit of learning for us. I mean, scrutiny, I think a couple of years, 2.5 years ago, engaged with a group of parents from PCAN, which is the group that supports parents and families with children with special education needs. It's actually very difficult for us now to go back and pick up and talk to the same parents we talked to 2 years ago. So we know we've got some visits planned in this year. We need to really make sure that we can listen to and re-engage with parents to see, how their experience of changes is. So that's a learning lesson for us, and so perhaps we can help in that respect as well. Okay, thanks. Right. So, and again, I think it's Councillor Elizabeth Smage is the chair of Overview Scrutiny, has asked us to. We're really keen to do pre-decision scrutiny. Just think, early days, how can scrutiny be involved in any decisions that can be made? Thank you. Right, item 9 is feedback from panel members on issues considered at Corporate Parenting Board. That's really fresh in some of our memories because that happened this morning. I'm going to give panel members some feedback about the performance report. Richard, you might want to think. I had to leave at 11, so you might want to give us a bit of feedback on the items that you were there for after I left. There was feedback from the Virtual Schools head, Janet Tolley, and there was some consideration of the feedback from the Children's Ambition Board. So I just want to talk to panel about some feedback about the performance report that was discussed this morning. And panel members over the last 2 years to 3 years have expressed concerns about the numbers of looked after children in Kirklees, because the number of children looked after in Kirklees is lower compared to our statistical neighbours. So the fewer children looked after by the local authority. And there's a worry that there were children not being looked after or not being picked up by child protection, and that's one of the reasons why they're low. So Ophelia Ricks, who leads on this and was talking through that, has actually done quite a lot of work to explain why there are fewer children looked after in Kirklees than there are in other areas. Over time, we've talked about special guardianship orders, which are used quite a lot of them in Kirklees and not more so than there are in other local authorities. So Ophelia, when she was talking about that, so the number of children looked after at the moment in Kirklees is 605. That is down from about 700 over the high point in the last couple of years. It's dropped by about 50, from 650 to 605 in the last 12 months. So it's going, and there's still a downward trend. And Ophelia really unpicked that. What she said to us is that in the last accounting period, actually 75 children have still come into the care of the local authority. So there are still where it's deemed necessary for a child to come to be looked after, that happens. That's still happening. Okay, so we don't think we're missing children. But also at the same time, 87 children are no longer looked after by the local authority. So there's that's happening as well. So there is a downward trend about the number of children looked after. And actually she unpicked why are those children no longer looked after? And she referred to special guardianship orders, and that's where children have been placed with family members who are not the immediate family. So it might be an uncle, an aunt, or a grandparent, or an older sibling. So of the 87 children who are no longer looked after, 23 have been successfully placed with other family members with a special guardianship order. And Ophelia also said there are about 500 children in Kirklees who are subject to a special guardianship order. And if they were with other family members, they would be a child looked after by the local authority. So that could raise our figure from 605 up to over 1,100. So that's happened. I don't think Kirklees is the only authority in West Yorkshire. I think Leeds also, and both Leeds and Bradford use a lot of special guardianship orders, and that does bring the number of figures to look down. The other reason why children were no longer looked after in Kirklees is they have been returned to their families. And again, there's a lot of work going on, it might be in terms of early intervention, prevention, work with families to make sure that where appropriate, children are going back to their families and that with parents. So that's another reason why there's been that 87 children who are no longer looked after. There were 6 children who have been adopted. They're adopted. I think the other thing that was picked up was actually another, I think there are 5 children, young people who've been looked after for a long time, and they've been working with the multi-systemic therapy team, the Family Intervention Project, and work with families have made it possible for those children to go home again. So that's accounting for about 50 children who had been looked after and who were no longer looked after, and that contributed to that. So it actually has been, from a scrutiny perspective, there seems to be a lot of work gone on to find out why there's a fewer children looked after in Kirklees and in other like authorities, and actually to reassure panel members and also members of the wider public who might be listening to this about why that is the case. And that's bits of ongoing work. So I don't know if there's any questions panel members want to sort of ask about that or about reassurance. It is based on questions that we've asked at the time. So if anyone else ask anything about that? Paul?
I'd just like to say that that's very reassuring, because it is a question that the panel have had over the last 2 or 3 years as to why our figures are low compared with statistical neighbours. And we have had reassurance before that it's because early intervention and other activity in Kirklees is much better than our neighbouring authorities. So to have some more detail on that is really reassuring, and I think it's a very good news story for Kirklees, because it does mean that an awful lot of families are getting the support they need, and that, you know, we know how damaging it can be for children to be looked after. Not always, but there are many stories of that, and in particular that the national trend is for that going up elsewhere. So for it to be going down in Kirklees is a really good news story. So thank you everybody involved with that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and it is that reassurance that, you know, the children were trying the best, and again, given that this is a risk-based approach, trying the best that the authority can to make sure that children are not put at risk unnecessarily. Okay. I think I didn't ask this question, but Councillor Viv Kendrick, who's the chair of the panel, was asking about, again, concern about children you want there to be consistency in a child's sort of experience with children's social care, and actually still looking at why do some children have more than one social worker as well, and they do try and place children on, so questions were asked about that as well. Other questions that were asked about, again, placements of children outside area. That tends to be slightly lower in Kirklees than in other areas, and again, because there's a building of capacity and sufficiency, if that's the right word, within Kirklees, so we can place children within Kirklees. But there are some children, for whatever reason, who are placed quite a long way away from Kirklees. But there were questions asked about that at Corporate Parenting Board this morning. There are quite a few questions asked about health, and again about I think dentistry, because I mean, we know access to an NHS dentist is a concern for some parts of just general communities in some parts of Kirklees, and we were told there's some special relationships with dentists to make sure that that when children are in need of dental treatment, they can get that. Make sure that's fine. But perhaps with some of the checkups, that's more difficult to do because there's pressure on dentistry as well. But if there's a need, that's followed up. That's quite well. We had a report at that stage from the virtual school head, Janet Tolley, who's the sort of the head teacher, who's the overall responsibility for children looked after. And actually, that report was quite positive. All the educational outcomes, I think the ones I can remember from Key Stage 4, that's the children who just sat the GCSEs. Are in the upper quartile, so actually some quite high rank compared to ranking of other just nationally. That was quite good. The one area for concern was unauthorised absence, so that was in the third quartile. But my question about that to Janet was actually, considering there's a concern about authorised absence, then children seem to be doing quite well. Considering what we did get is that this sort of quite a flexible approach, looking about that, why our children, young people looked after, why they're not in school actually, but making sure that their needs are being met and about timetabling and things like that. So that seemed to be quite positive. The other report at that stage is there's, I think Ophelia Ricks again was asking about whether children are in education, employment or training when they stop being looked after. And then sometimes that's at 16. It might be if a child goes on to further education, that's extended. So they might be, that relationship might go on until in the 20s. And Ophelia was putting out a request to panel members, Corporate Parenting Board, but also I think to the wider panels all about ideas that people have about supporting children and young people when they are no longer looked after. I think my contribution to that, what I contribute is both my children who are now adults started work when they were 16 through apprenticeship programs, and I'm really keen for, and in fact, my youngest son started work 2 days after he was 16, and I've seen as a parent actually the real positive impact that's had on their life and their life skills as two young people who have been working, and you see it, and they're given quite responsible jobs, and actually are now responsible for other people who are much younger than that, who are younger than they are, and that's real positive. So how can we? That's one of my contributions. How can we be supporting looked after children to go into work if that's the right thing for them to do? Not just assuming that they need to be going to college at 16 and that. So again, if panel members have got ideas, not to scrutinise what's going on, but think, I've got ideas about how we can be better corporate parents, and then I think Ophelia would appreciate that. And if we've got ideas, so not just asking questions, but ideas about what we can do containing our, whilst recognising that some looked after children want to make their own path and their own way in life, and we are in contact with around 97% of our looked after our care leavers, and there's a plan in place for, I think, for 87% or for 90% of them, but not all children and young people, when they want care, want that continuing relationship with the local authority or with their carers. I think the other thing I picked up this morning about foster carers, and that actually it's really the Stay Put programme that the council has in place to allow children and young people to stay with foster carers beyond the time when they would have, when they cease to be looked after, so they continue that relationship. That's really positive. Although there are questions about the financial implications for that, to make sure it works for both the young person and the family, to make sure that positive relationship can continue. Okay. I think there was one other thing I wanted to say that we brought up before. Right, there have been questions asked about the ethnicity of children who are looked after. And Ophelia said there's actually been quite a bit of work being done with children of an Asian British heritage, and whether we, particularly working with families and extended families, again, around special guardianship orders and placing children with extended family. But I think there was a bit of a concern about, are the children being missed because of their ethnicity or that? So that work is ongoing. There has been some stuff going on, and that was reported back to Corporate Parenting Board this morning. Okay. Richard, I don't know if you want to add anything that you picked up around the report, Janet Tolley's report from the virtual school or the Children's Ambition Board after I left the meeting at 11 this morning.
Hello, Andrew. Unfortunately, my laptop decided to do several reboots, and it made it extremely difficult for me to hear what was going on, and it took me out. So, unfortunately, I didn't really hear much after you left. So, no. I did make the point, actually, during the meeting that the virtual school is something I don't understand that well. And I asked if we could have a separate session, or perhaps include it in one of the formal meetings, just to explain to members who were interested, what the how it constituted, how the virtual school was constituted, and how it worked. So that was hopefully something that's going to happen in the future. But unfortunately, I didn't hear Janet's report after you left because of the IT issues I was experiencing.
Yeah, I think that was a really good point, Richard. I think we've had informal feedback about how the virtual school works and the virtual governing body. I'm not going to ask Carol. I understand that Carol Patterson is one of our virtual school governors, so that's. But I think even if we don't have a presentation to panel or to Corporate Parenting Board, actually just have some way of understanding how the virtual school works. That would be really useful. So look forward to that being fed back. Well, we don't need to do it now, but if that be looking forward to that happening at a Corporate Parenting Board, and that perhaps could be fed back to us as the scrutiny panel as well. And if panel members want to observe that meeting, we could, again, if we can circulate links and we can go as an observers just to see what's happening. Or there might be particular items you want to go and look at. Carol, you Andrew, put your camera on. Oh, sorry, Richard. Yeah.
Sorry. I was just going to respond to that. I don't know what the format of that would be. I sort of suggested if it wasn't appropriate to come to the board, then people could be invited. But if it's going to be more of that sort of private individual, or just a few of us, I'm happy to bring that back and give an overview. I think I sort of understand how it works in terms of the figures that they're presenting to us and things, but it's more of a more how the actual virtual school itself works, not necessarily the stats that they're giving us. The stats are pretty much in line with the stats that could be available for general education. So that was more my ask, just so I understood how it worked, for my benefit really. So I'll bring that back to this panel if it helps afterwards.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. That would be that would be good feedback from the board. Carol, did you want to just briefly chip in about your role as a virtual school governor?
Yeah, I'm not just a governor. I'm the chair of the governors. But like you've paid visits to the corporate parenting board, I mean, you could also pay a visit to the virtual governing body. I mean, that certainly would give anybody a good understanding of how it happens. But I see no reason why we also couldn't at a later date provide some sort of presentation on how the virtual school works.
That's a brilliant offer, Carol. I mean, I think in line with our pattern of visiting and observing and just seeing what's going on rather than doing something extra. So I think thanks, Richard, for your offer to do some feedback at a future panel, and thank you, Carol, for that invitation for some of us to go and just watch a virtual school, virtual school governing body in action. That's perhaps one for you, Paul, as a school governor of long standing. Then perhaps that just would be interesting to compare the two. Useful feedback. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. And I'm just getting used to feeding back from corporate parenting board as well. So I have remembered as I've been going down. I've met to make better notes. So the other thing I did observe this morning, again, we've asked questions about fostering adoption, fostering about sufficient fostering families in Kirklees. I mean, I just express our thanks for the work that foster families do in Kirklees. One of the things I've seen that's improved over the changes, actually, we had two members of the Kirklees Fostering Network are members of the Corporate Parenting Board, Keith Fielding and Colleen, I can't remember Colin's, but they're there. So they're actually, not only are they fostering children and young people, but also contributing to the way that that's done. I think that's a change I've seen since I first started going to Corporate Parenting Board. That's brilliant. But Vic Kendrick, who chairs that panel, was asking again, so we have Kirklees foster people who are fostering, but also independent fostering. And I think Viv had been adding up the numbers, and there's one more independent fostering than Kirklees fosters, and she's wanted to rebalance that as well because it costs more for independent for a child to be fostered independently as it does through Kirklees. And of course, what we are concerned, it's not just the cost; it's about actually the quality of that foster family placement and the quality of that and resources. But Viv, as chair of the panel, was asking questions about that, as I think panel members have done over the years. And again, if we know, if there's a way of us encouraging more people to become foster carers, and we can think of that with our networks and connections. And I think one of the things that I triggered, I think this is through faith communities. We had SACRE, the Standing Advisory Body for Religious Education. One of the things I've been doing through there is the opportunities through faith groups and people who have got other worldviews. Through those, we can encourage people to be coming forward as foster families, foster carers, and we could try to. And again, panel members, if you've got any other ideas about how we can be encouraging that to happen, that would be really appreciated by the Corporate Parenting Board and officers who are responsible for that. Okay. Any other, not necessarily feedback, but any things that panel members would want us to be bringing up at Corporate Parenting Board, or think ought to be brought up at that stage, knowing what we do? No, thank you. Right, I will move on then. We will move on to Children's Scrutiny Panel Work Programme, item 10 on our agenda this afternoon. I think just the general, so again you'll see, so I'm on page 11 of our printed reports, one of the work programme. So we are going to keep the item about pre-decision scrutiny. We're going to bring that to every meeting, and we are going to encourage, particularly officers and cabinet members, if you think there's something coming up that you want to get scrutiny involved in early on, then that we'd like that to happen. And I think the agreement is, if there's anything that we observe before it goes into the public domain, the covenant, the contract is that we don't, it certainly doesn't appear in the public domain before it appears in the cabinet reports, or there needs to be some sort of, so it's an observer status. We are quite privileged to see information that goes forward. And actually there's a way, if we do that, then there's perhaps things that we can agree can appear in the public domain in some of our meetings earlier on, because with openness and transparency. Performance information is going to appear as a standing item, but again, if we've seen that happen at other places, we don't want to duplicate work going on in this meeting. And again, if you're picking up questions on the reports that we do get in our papers, if you want to drop an email to Helen primarily, and we'll feed those through to officers. And again, if we did that, those could have been done at corporate parenting this morning as well. And we are going to get used to feeding back from corporate parenting board, and I'll have a pro forma so I can make sure I can do that as effectively as possible. And Richard and Elizabeth are going to agree to do that as well. And feedback from ambition board minutes. I'm going to go down now to page 3 of that particular, page 13 of the overall report. So we've got an item, panel to agree an area for focus, and that's for sufficiency for children's services, places and staffing resources. I think what we have picked up with some of our visits is, I think Ophelia picked it up this morning, is that there is a shortage of children's social workers at a national level. And Kirklees has made the decision not to use agency work at the moment. All of our social workers are employed by Kirklees. And that, because there's a national shortage, that seems to be creating additional pressure for social workers. And we witnessed that in our visit to Batley the other week. But that has been managed, although that's creating pressure, that's been managed in-house, and that's felt to be the right thing to do at the moment. But we do want to be part of the process. Elaine's coming up on that. Thank you, Elaine. But also we want to be part of that. So some of the questions we ask when we go out about professional development for social workers, and we do pick that up. So I think we want to see how the council, cabinet and officers are managing that pressure that we know at the moment. Elaine, do you want to just come in on that?
Yeah, good afternoon. I'm Elaine Shane. I'm the Service Director of Family Support and Child Protection. And I think Councillor Martington, this fits really nicely with the National Care Review that's just been produced. We're waiting for a government response. But within that review, there is a recognition about the shortage of social workers, as you say, nationally, and a move towards actually using different types of practitioners at different levels of work. And this is where I'd work closely with Joanne and her teams around that early support. And it looks at where our child in need cases might be held by not necessarily a social worker, but different type of practitioner, and how that worker would keep consistent with the family. And if then it moved up to child protection, they would have an allocated social worker that would work with the family support worker, for want of a better title. What we're going to do in the interim, whilst we're awaiting actually feedback from the government in terms of what they're accepting about the recommendations, is we're going to look at some roles within our social work teams that to test some of this out. So take some of our social work vacancies and we're talking about social work assistants potentially, and these will be individuals as well that we can actually start to grow our own social workers. So I think you're right in terms of Batley, for example. I know there was a visit and it talked about having 7 social work vacancies, but also recognition that 2 people coming back from maternity and then some social workers starting that were newly qualified but won't be able to practice until September, because that's when the qualifications formalised. But I think it will be worthwhile us bringing something back in terms of how we're going to manage this as a whole, and the different approaches we're taking to bring in social workers into the workforce through the Frontline programme, which is a national programme, the Step Up to Social Work programme, and then using apprenticeships as well. And then actually, I think most importantly is the retention of social workers and the package that we wrap around them actually once they start in practice in Kirklees. And I think what we've just seen recently, we've just had a recent JTI inspection, and our social workers talk very positively about their experience within Kirklees and how they've remained in Kirklees and actually seen the transformation of the services that people are describing. So I think there's just more work to be done, and certainly Scrutiny will have a role in that in terms of our checks and balances, that we're taking the right action at the right time.
Yeah. So I think from a Scrutiny's perspective, Elaine, we'll keep asking, so when we do our visits, and we're going to keep that on the road, keep going on. So no, Graham, you came to the visit in Batley to the frontline team, but I think as many panel members as possible can sort of go to one, and it gives you a really good idea of what's going on, enables you, and also to see what's happening, you know, how, and again, when we think of issues we had 4 or 5 years ago with staffing and pressure on staff, it's great to see, even when, you know, to see how that's been, you know, how that's working and changed. So that's great, Elaine. So if we can just, we'll keep asking that question as part of our process today. Elaine, you want to come back in?
Yeah, I'd just like to add, I think the difference from now and actually looking back into 2016 and shortly beyond that is the stability of our management service. So from myself down to heads of service, service managers and team managers, we've got a lot of stability in that part of the workforce. And actually then, so the support to social workers is in a much better place. They feel that they've got the right wraparound, they're getting the development opportunities of supervision. So we are in a very different place. So although there are some pressures and they move to different teams depending on how the recruitment goes, actually the management of that is much more effective, and social workers will tell you that they're feeling supported in the work that they do, even though it can feel more challenging at times than others. Our average caseloads, even though we've got vacancies, is still around 17, whereas 4 or 5 years ago, I've got the first data when I first visited Kirklees, and caseloads were around 35. So they're less than half of that. So we are managing that, but actually, you know, don't want to take our eye off the ball, so to speak, and want to make sure that we're putting mechanisms in place so social workers feel supported and want to stay with us.
So if we can see some of that happening, if we can plan that, us seeing some of that happening, Elaine, and that just allows us to corroborate what's been said here, that's great. Then we'll do that. I think the other thing about the places, again, we've had questions at corporate parenting this morning about children's placed within the authority and out of it. I think there are opportunities for 2 visits. I think the children's home, if that's the correct word to use, to observe that, you know, just see how that's working. If we can do that, that'd be really good. And what future plans are on that. Okay, plan that in. The changes to the Children and Young People's Activity Programme, I think from a council perspective, if we can see what's happening in our wards, pick that up, and I suppose from a service point of view, if you can just bear in mind if councillors could be made aware of what's happening with children and young people's activities in their wards, and we might want to just do some contact with our other colleagues about what's happening in their wards. Yeah, Emma.
Yeah, just to come on the young people's activity team provision in my ward, sadly for the last 14 years we've not had an after school club or any sort of youth activities, and just a couple of questions on it. The first one is, how quickly will this come into practice? Who will govern this? Is it going to be the local communities, the schools, or the council? And will it be working with schools or just community centres and different activities in the areas?
Yeah. So I don't think, might not have a response this afternoon, but there's some really good questions about, we've been told that there's going to be changes too. So if we can pick those up and yeah, we can get some responses to those, and not just your ward, but the other wards as well. Okay. Yeah, they're fine. Yeah. But that's about, yeah. I don't know. James, is there anything you want to, does that sound like okay to you, Richard? Yeah, that's fine. Okay. Sorry, Paul.
It does say we're expecting a report in September 22, so is that still anticipated?
I think we will do, but we might get a report here. It'll be interesting. I will, again, in the same way that Amma is, and I'm sure it's called, I'd be interested to know what's happening in my ward, and I'm sure our other, the other colleagues would be interested to know what's happening in the other wards as well. So, yeah, looking forward to the report, but just those anecdotal stuff about what's happening. Yeah, and I do get anecdotal stuff. I mean, the Kirklees Youth Alliance, so not just in my ward, but some of the places where I work as well. You just know there's stuff going on, and so I'm picking that up. Be interesting to know what other councils are picking up as well. Yeah. Oh, Chris. Yeah, and this is again, it's not necessarily an answer to the question, but how we might find out, corroborate what we've been told.
Not the answer to the question, Chair, but I will certainly take it back and coordinate a response for councillors so that they have some understanding, because I think we're a week and a half away from the breakup of schools, so that will be that we'll get some information out in good time to councillors if that's helpful.
Thanks. Right, I'm going to go on to page 4, the SEND, special education needs and high needs. So Helen and I had a really good meeting with a couple of people from Pecan, and we've agreed to go and meet some parents involved with, and carers involved with Pecan. So if Helen can circulate the dates and times when that's available, so if you can find a time to come along, I think some of them are drop-in sessions. So there's one in Huddersfield, one in North Kirklees, is that Thornhill? Yes. Yeah, so Thornhill. So if you've got time to do that, and if you can't meet those meetings, I think those networks meet on a regular basis, and there might be other ones you can go to, but just to let Helen know that you're intending to go, and so we can let people know, so it's not, so people are aware that you're heading there, and that'd be great. So, and again, we've talked to you on about the outcome of the SEND inspection and planning in, actually looking at how that scrutiny, having a view of, an overview of how that's been developed and future scrutiny opportunities there. Okay. Elaine, are you wanting to?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, Councillor Marchant, for the future agenda, that actually the outcome of our JTI inspection, so that's a joint area targeted inspection, and it was around exploitation, which is a conversation we've had at Scrutiny before. It was mainly focused on criminal exploitation, but also covered sexual exploitation. And the letter is due to be published, I believe, at the end of August, so probably would be ready for a September scrutiny to bring and talk through that. And I think that, I can't give the details, I can say the inspection was very positive. It was a multi-agency inspection, so, you know, demonstrated the strengths of the partnerships. I think it'll be assuring for panel members to bring the outcome of that inspection in September.
Yeah, do you just want to repeat? It's the joint area inspection. What's the technical?
It's a joint area targeted inspection. So it is a multi-agency, very multi-agency inspection.
Yeah, thanks, Elaine. Okay. Yeah, fine. Thank you. Right, mental health in schools. I think we're getting that back in there. I think there's a few of us be interested to know that, so the NHS are rolling out some of that at the moment. So it'd be interesting to know how that's working. Again, it'd be interesting again from councillor colleagues or people in the community, whether you've got any feedback, school governors and stuff like that as well. I think we're going to plan that in as well. And I think the other thing, I know, so Councillor Reynolds and myself have got some experience with the ladder project in the Goker, Combe Valley and Linley wards. And I understand there's something quite interesting going on in the Spen area as well. So I'd just be interested to know how the rollout is working for schools in those areas. Okay. I'm not sure there's anything else. Are there any other comments or questions that panel members have got about the work programme? No. I think James, you brought the issue you brought about in planning about the some of the gang stuff that's in areas, some of the wards as well. We're going to have just a direct visit for yourself, just to pick up some of what's going on. That would be appreciated. So if you feel you want to feed some of that back, that would be really appreciated as well. That's great. Okay, right. Helen, have we covered everything we need to cover? Right, thank you. Any other sorry? 6th of All right, fine. Okay. So just to let everybody know that the next meeting in public is on the 6th of September at 10 o'clock. Apologies for the early start, relatively early start for that. So if you'd like to join us online for that, that would be really, really appreciated. And that would, yeah, that'd be great. So again, thank you for everybody for the contributions you've made, your comments and questions this afternoon, and all the work that anybody does with children and young people, whether that's directly or indirectly. That is really appreciated. So thank you this afternoon, and take care, everybody, till we meet again in September.
Thank you.